Shalom, shalom. This is Kapari, aka Pops. Jim at Chicago with another sit down. Before I get started, though, like always, I want to send all praises, honor, and glory out to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Kakodash. To the apostles and elders of GMS out of New York, elder bishops out of Connecticut, I want to send double honors because they do rule well. For the brethren around the world, pushing this truth uncut, unfiltered, giving you the good, the bad, and the ugly of the scriptures, correctly breaking down the prophecies and the interaction with the people on the planet. With the people on the planet, I want to send salutations. For the hopefully elect, I hope this is edifying. For the Aquath, the fear and the truthless listeners, to say the chair to keep doing so. But for the scorners, call for reprobate 2/3 Israelites and 17 other nations who are in the midst of Jacob's trouble, it's going to get a whole lot worse. Anyway, this come up in my feed, one of the things I'm subscribed to, and I was just looking at it, and I'm thinking about Elder Malcolm. He's the local historian here in the Chicagoland area, and he speaks about these things, on great details at times, when he's teaching, okay? But I had no idea that it was over 200 black cities drowned underwater. The government's dark history. So this is black culture. I hate that thing because we bring a light to what this Edomite has done, which his nature is that of blackness because it has no light. He does everything that goes clean contrary to the law, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh, Yahweh Shai, because he wasn't built for that. He was actually built to be the wicked and the demon and the unrighteousness of the earth. And since the earth was plunged into that in the beginning, he has only prospered and gotten stronger to the point where right now the basis of men is absolutely in rulership. So, like I said, Malcolm goes into this quite a bit. I started watching it. I done rewound it back a little bit. I'm going to let it start from the beginning. Like I said, I'm using this all under the Fair Use Act, which I flashed at the beginning of this video, so you all can get a chance to see this and whatnot. So this is actually real. This is actually what happened. Malcolm speaks upon this extensively when he decides to go into this. And now, like I said, this internet and what is spewing and telling on these Edomites, the self-proclaimed white man, the Caucasian from the Caucasus Mountains, and this type of thing, Idumea, which is another word of saying Esau, and the whole deal is what it is. So let's let this play, and then we're going to go from this. And like I said, we use little examples like Rosewood and whatnot as far as movies and show you how this Edomite's mindset is. But now let's go and see the treachery and the systemic racism that's part of America that they don't even want to talk about. Okay, so here we go.
Imagine standing near a quiet, peaceful lake as you watch the sunset fall into the calm waters. It's tranquil, almost serene, until you realize the dark secret that's hidden beneath the beautiful surface. What if I told you that an entire city is beneath those waters? You heard me right. Not just any town, but a black community that was once thriving. It wasn't a mistake. These cities were wiped away deliberately, and
And you see how they say black, totally devoid of light, and this, that, and the other. I mean, it's this man made up this construct of white and black. Okay, no, before the what's that, the 1700s, 1800s, whatever that might have been, there was no such thing as white people. Okay, and this, that, and the other. They made that construct to make themselves come off as the people being of purity, which they are the very opposite of it. They are the absolute people of the darkness, designed that way by Yahweh, Yahweh Shai himself. Okay? So the design that way per the instructions of Yahweh by Yahweh Shai himself. Okay? So let's go on. Them spirits built for that. So let's go and let this play through.
Tory was buried under decades of silence. This isn't some haunting historical tale from the past, but the reality of over 200 black cities across the United States. These cities were places where black families who came fresh from the horrors of slavery dared to dream of a better future. They built an entire town that had homes, schools, and businesses that stood as symbols of hope and resilience. But what happened next is shocking. These communities became targets of...
You know what? I'm going to stick a scripture in here. I was going to wait to the end, but I'm going to stick that in here now so you can understand. Let's back it up just a little bit.
Resentment and destruction. The supremacy didn't just want to suppress black success, but also the city is beneath those waters. You heard me right. Not just any town, but a black community that was once thriving. It wasn't a mistake. These cities were wiped away deliberately, and its story was buried under decades of silence. This isn't some haunting historical tale from the past, but the reality of over 200 black cities across the United States. These cities were places where black families who came fresh from the horrors of slavery dared to dream of a better future.
Okay, now I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to go and get this scripture. Okay, so, you know, we get these people trying to tell us here in America, you know, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all these other kinds of things of bullshit, right? And we tell them about all these years of head start that they've got. But let me show you something, and the scriptures bear witness to it. Ezekiel 35th chapter. Let me see. Pick it up about 5 or so. Okay, Ezekiel 35:5. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred. And who's had a perpetual hatred? Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. Okay, he, he hated his brother Jacob, and I've got scriptures. I'm gonna go into that, but I just want to pull this out. I'm gonna pull this one part of it out, then I'm gonna come back to it again and whatnot. But I want to read this so you can understand it. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred and has shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword, which was Esau's blessing, in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. So when was slavery supposed to have been over with here in America? 1863 or so? Is that when the slaves were supposedly freed? When their iniquity had an end, when their punishment had actually supposedly been come to an end, which it hasn't. So-called Negro and Latino men can get gunned down in the fucking streets now, still to this day. Okay, so it was supposed to have came to an end, but they still didn't let up. This Edomite and his systematic racism still didn't let up. Okay, well you got Latin descent being foreigners in a country that they was at when the so-called Edomite, which would be the people of Spain, came here in the first place. Okay, so now let's just go back here and get this going. We'll come back to it. That came up and I just had to put that scripture in there so you can understand. This is these people going against scriptures themselves. Okay.
Came fresh from the horrors of slavery, dared to dream of a better future. They built an entire town that had homes, schools, and businesses that stood as symbols of hope and resilience. But what happened next is shocking. These communities became targets of resentment and destruction. The supremacy didn't just want to suppress black success, but also wanted to erase it from existence. And so, under the guise of progress, the government stepped in, flooding these communities and drowning their stories, their legacies, and their dreams beneath the waters. Why would the government do this? And how could such a deliberate act of erasure happen on such a large scale? This isn't just a story of lakes and dams, but one that was inspired by racism as a weapon against black progress. This is a dark chapter in history that most people are not familiar with. A deliberate attempt.
A dark chapter in history. Look at that. A black chapter in history. Okay, dark, black, void of light. It shows no fucking constructive love for people at all. But they say, you know, why can't you love us? Why can't you just let bygones be bygones? Why can't you just, it was such a long time ago, get over it? They don't even want to talk about it. But these people did it. They did it, and they still they was reaping the benefits from it for quite a long time. But now that the benefits are starting to run out, now they want to say, well, can't we all just forget about that part and try to get together and move on? No, we can't. No, because that's not scripture either. So let's let it play.
To ensure these black cities were wiped away and forever forgotten. In this video, we're exposing these hidden stories and bringing them to light. Get comfortable as we dive into the depths of America's water to uncover how systemic racism led to the literal and figurative drowning of black progress. Before we dive in, like this video and subscribe to this channel. Let's dive in. To truly understand what led to the drowning of these black cities, we must first know what they represented: resilience, innovation, and hope. After the Civil War, when the slaves became free, black Americans found themselves in a tight situation. Freedom had been declared, but equality was far from reality. Many former slaves and their descendants sought refuge in building their community where they could excel and be free from the oppression of the whites. From the late 19th century to the early 20th century, these black communities had made significant progress. Some towns like Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is popularly known as Black Wall Street, and Eatonville, Florida, rose as beacons of success. Beyond being residential settlements, they were centers of innovation. Schools were established, businesses prospered, and black Americans proved that they could achieve greatness despite the odds stacked against them and the challenges that dropped their back to the ground. But their success did not just pass by like the wind. It attracted the interest of the whites, and it became a threat. White neighbors became envious, and a deeply ingrained belief in black
Now, like I said, these were constructs that were invented. White, black. But if white's supposed to be pure and kind and enlightened and all these, how are they doing this? How are they doing this? Because they put them constructs in place, but to shield and hide who they are, and put them in place to hide who we are. And now you got Putin revealing black iconic depictions of saints and things of this nature from biblical history that goes totally against the systemic racism that's been pushed here in America, and the people that these paintings and whatnot depict being the children and the people of God, goes totally against what these people here in America actually want to face. So let's let it play through.
Superiority and a growing resentment. How could a people they once enslaved now exceed them in wealth, education, and influence? Systemic racism became a lifestyle. The same government that promised freedom and justice for the people began to create laws and policies designed to frustrate the progress of blacks. Jim Crow laws promoted segregation and denied black citizens of their fundamental rights. These policies ensured black...
And Elder Malcolm talks about this a lot because he just had a lawsuit that he had, Title 4D, fall apart after 2 years in court, where basically he had won the thing. Title 4D, if you don't know what that's talking about, is child support, and how it's unconstitutional to begin with, among other things. And they fought it until basically the law of the land has been taken over, and the people here in America don't even realize it yet, because of the fact that they think that you think you're still under the constitutional law, and you're not. and you're not. It's been basically overshadowed and taken over by maritime law. Okay, so when you go into court now, when you go in the courtroom now and look at these types of things, you basically under the Hague. Okay, which is a foreign government, and you're not supposed to be, as an American citizen, ever subjected to being under a foreign government while you're on your own land. You're not supposed to have to deal with that, and they've taken that over and did just that. So here we go.
Families couldn't buy homes in prosperous neighborhoods, sidelining them from wealth-building opportunities. Despite these barriers, Black communities continued to progress. During the early 1900s, many of these towns were entirely independent. Banks owned by Blacks, schools, hospitals, and churches provided everything their residents needed, but their prosperity came at a dangerous cost. They became targets. White supremacists unleashed acts of violence, and entire towns were burned to the ground during race massacres. As if the violence wasn't enough, they employed a new measure of destruction, one that disguised to be progress. Infrastructure projects like dams, reservoirs, and lakes became tools of oppression. Under the pretense of public good, governments declared eminent domain that forced Black families off their land. These communities that were built on dreams and hard work were drowned and erased from the map and memory of people. What we see today as tranquil bodies of water were thriving centers of Black excellence. The question is, why hasn't history remembered them? Why were their stories given a blind eye? The answer lies in the intentional act of systemic racism. This act was determined to harm Black communities and to ensure their successes were forgotten. These cities weren't just towns, they were legacies that, despite being buried underwater, demand to rise again. The conscious drowning of Black cities across the United States wasn't just a historic accident, but a calculated act of systemic oppression. The government used eminent domain laws and infrastructure projects as cover to carry out a campaign that would erase thriving Black communities and replace them with lakes, reservoirs, and dams. Under these calm waters are the physical remnants of homes and businesses, and also the buried legacies and stories of Black resilience and progress. During the early 20th century, as the country grew, large-scale infrastructure projects became crucial in order to meet the demands for electricity, water, and flood control. The government used eminent domain with a claim of private property for public use as a tool to seize land. However, Black communities were disproportionately targeted, with almost no regard for their rights or any form of compensation. These projects weren't just about utility, they served a dual purpose. Under the guise of progress, Black communities were brought down to nothing, and their lands were often deemed expendable. In reality, these projects became a strategy to dismantle the economic and social backbone of thriving Black cities. An infamous example of a drowned Black city is Oscarville, Georgia, beneath Lake Lanier. During the early 1900s, Oscarville was an active Black community in Forsyth County, Georgia. It had a good number of schools, churches, and farms that were established by industrious Black families. But racial violence changed the whole narrative. In 1912, after baseless accusations against Black residents, white mobs forced almost the entire Black population out of the county. They went as far as seizing their lands, and by the 1950s, the government flooded the area to create Lake Lanier. Today, the lake is a popular recreation site, but only a few visitors know it sits in a community that was destroyed by racial hatred. Another city is Boynton, Alabama. Boynton was another thriving Black residential settlement that provided economic independence and a sense of community to its residents. In the mid-20th century, it was drowned to create the Walter F. George Reservoir. The families displaced by this project received little compensation, and their historic legacy was swallowed by the rising waters. Another city you didn't know about is the Tennessee Valley. During the New Deal era, the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, was tasked with building dams and reservoirs to provide electricity and flood control. Although the projects benefited many, Black communities were often given up in the process. Thousands of black families were displaced, their homes and towns flooded, while white landowners were more likely to receive fair compensation. The government not only facilitated the destruction of black cities, but actively ensured their stories were buried. Records of these communities were rarely preserved, and the descendants of displaced families were left without a voice. The establishment of these lakes and reservoirs wasn't a random act of development, but an intentional choice that prioritized white progress over black lives. In many scenarios, the displacement was accompanied by violent intimidation. Black residents were often given short notice before being evicted. Those who resisted were threatened, or even worse, just to make them comply through fear. Before the flooding of these communities, many were already under siege. Incidents of racial violence like the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and the 1919 Red Summer created an environment where black towns became vulnerable. These communities that were once devastated by violence became easy targets for so-called progress. The drowning of black cities is one of the earliest examples of environmental racism. White communities were often spared or adequately compensated, while black towns were disproportionately chosen for displacement. This pattern echoes today in scenarios where black neighborhoods are subjected to harmful environmental policies and projects. When over 200 black cities were drowned under the umbrella of progress, the consequences of the destruction went far beyond the physical effects. These weren't just towns submerged underwater, but aspirations of vibrant communities, symbols of black resilience, and the embodiment of dreams that refused to die after centuries of enslavement. What was lost in these acts of systemic racism still haunts us today and shapes the reality of racial inequality in America. These floods robbed black families